This is CX of M Radio, the voice of customer experience professionals.
Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time to join us. A special welcome, as always, to those of you who are listening to the podcast for the first time. I have talked to a few people lately that said they discovered the podcast and they're trying to play catch up. This is episode number 202. They got a ways to go in doing that, but I am grateful. I'm always thankful that there are folks who do recognize the value that's being presented, who understand the purpose and who understand the spirit behind it, or the attitude, if you will, behind what we're doing in this podcast. This podcast, the world of user experience with Darren Hood, the world of UX with Darren Hood, is targeted to help people to understand the broad perspectives associated with this discipline. We're not just going to talk about tools. We're not just going to talk about jobs. We're not just going to talk about all those other little popular things that come up, because there's a whole host of things that don't get addressed. And those things usually end up causing people to go astray. They cause people to become frustrated. They cause people to get caught up in a state of a conundrum, if you will, again. And it's just, we want to talk about everything. We don't want to leave anything out. Between me, the guests that I bring on the show, the goal is to cover any and everything that we possibly can for the betterment of the discipline, for the betterment of people in the discipline. So there's a little bit of an introduction today. We are back looking at the Sinister series, as we started to call it for short. We're basically talking about different traits that are active in UX circles today, things that people see, things people are experiencing, things that people, they see these things, they go, what in the world did I get myself into? We want to help you get around these things. We want to help people understand it. And I don't think I've ever had the volume of feedback, the volume of appreciation that I've received for anything we've ever done on this show. This is by far the longest series we've ever done. It definitely, we're covering the broadest spectrum of topics that we've ever covered, and justifiably so, because the things that are happening, this is wild stuff, folks. This is really wild stuff that we're looking at. There are things here that a lot of people don't want to cover, and we talked about this earlier on to give you a little bit of a hint, especially if you're tuning in for the first time. There's a lot of cowards today. I'm going to flat out say it. I don't pull punches, by the way, just in case you're new. There's a lot of cowards. There's a lot of people. They'll say, hey, I got a word of wisdom and a word of encouragement for you today. And then they disappear back into the bushes, so to speak. And they know that you're going to experience all these things. They see you experiencing all these things, but they just don't have the guts. I'm going to be very raw here. They don't care enough about you to share what they could share, because they're experiencing it too. So why not help people? I don't like seeing people suffer needlessly. I don't like seeing people get their brains tied up in knots, so to speak. I don't like seeing people get discouraged and feel helpless and feel powerless. I don't like that. So I want to help people. We're going to hopefully share some of these things. For some people, it'll be before they experience it. Some people, from what I've been being told, and because I already knew, there are things that people are experiencing, didn't know what to do, and some of this stuff is being brought up at the right time, so now they know how to address it. So we want to empower UXers. We want to help UXers. So all that said, we're going to get right back into our series here. There is another insertion, by the way. So I thought we were going to dive into the next segment, but there's something else that I'm sort of glad we were delayed, because I would have ended up talking about this anyway. And the final segments are supposed to be the final segments. But I made another observation I had some conversations. There were some things that came up, and I'm going, wow, I don't think we've talked about this. Surely not the way we're going to talk about it today, but we're going to spend this entire episode focusing on one of the most sinister traits that's at work in UX today, and it has to do with the redefinition of UX. The discipline, for years, I said UX is under siege. And people told me to shut up, and they told me I was crazy for bringing that up. And really, those people saw it too. They just didn't want to address it. I would be at a meetup, and I would talk to people about what was going on or try to bring it up as a topic. And people say, hey, no, we need to talk about something else, or we need to talk about something positive, or Darren, they're shushing me. I'm a grown human being, and people shushing me like I'm a 6-year-old child. And then sadly, you watch people who hear those things and have people shielding them from these things run smack dab, run head on into these things that I'm talking about. And because they don't want me to say anything, or they won't support, people don't know what to do. And there's a lot of predatory people in UX circles today. These people are being taken advantage of because nobody wants to expose them. So that's really something that I actually told someone earlier today, that they were engaging in a conversation where misinformation was being shared. And so I'm looking out for people's best interest. The person said, why would you share something so negative? Interestingly, they thought what I said was being negative, but they didn't think that the misinformation that was being presented to them was negative. And those of you who know me know I don't use the words positive or negative. I'm using it because that's what the person said. There is no such thing as positive or negative. For those of you who've never heard me say that before, there is constructive and there is destructive. And if you tweak your brain and see those things, that thing that you didn't feel good when you heard it, will it build you up? Will it help you to be better? Will it help you understand if you have the proverbial nail in your tire, so to speak? Then you need to know that. And you need to be grateful that somebody told you, instead of demonizing the person that was actually looking out for your best interest. These types of things are why we suffer the way that we do in UX today. And so I hope that, people who listen to this podcast, they're listening because they value it. You're not going to listen to this podcast if you want your ego to be stroked, if you want your ear to be tickled, if you want to hear a bunch of sugar-coated stuff. You're not going to listen to this podcast. You're going to cut it off quick, fast, and in a hurry, because I'm not going to be coddling you. Coddling is one of the sinister traits. Enabling people who need to be corrected is a sinister trait. So these are the types of things we need to get over, these things, because this discipline is still shaping. It's still forming. It's still growing. And as you're going to see today, because it actually has been redefined, it's set in stone now. People think a lot of things about UX that are not true, and they take it for gospel, if you will, and that's not good for any of us, as we're going to explain. So let me take you down the journey, to explain a few things before I address directly some of the things we want to share during this session on today. So up until about 2011 to 2012, UX was all about the fundamentals. At your place of employment, people talk about UX. We talked about the fundamentals. When you were doing your work, it was all about the fundamentals. When you went to a conference, it was all about the fundamentals. If you looked at an article online, it was all about the fundamentals. Everything about UX, everybody took the discipline and put the discipline on a pedestal, and we all focused on the discipline and continue to try to represent the discipline properly. Yay, us. That's what we were doing up until 2011 to 2012, right along in there. In 2011, the boot camps launched. Why? There's an explosion of jobs, and everybody doesn't want to go and get a degree. What else can we do? Wasn't a bad idea to establish a boot camp. It wasn't a bad idea at all. If there's a way to give people some type of an education to help produce people who can fill these jobs, and because there was this glut of jobs, there wasn't enough qualified people to fill it. So people had a great idea, but it simply was not executed the right way at all. Boot camps were never dedicated to the purity of the discipline. Boot camps were never concerned about the ethics of the discipline. Boot camps never had a solid grasp on pedagogy, andragogy, hudagogy. They were not set concerning any of those things. So they established things, and anybody who doesn't know anything will be happy when somebody will tell them something. And it's that mindset that paved the way for the boot camps to thrive. So there's this mad rush to the boot camps, and the UX job boom is now underway. And some people, though, they weren't even going to wait. They weren't going to go to the boot camps. They weren't worried about any of that. So a lot of people especially visual designers, started to fabricate their way, developers too, started to fabricate their way into UX roles. And if you want to hire somebody to do that, that's where I learned about the retrofits. I learned about them back in 2012, 2013. That's when I started learning about these people who end up in a UX role because they just happen to be available and they had interest, and people put them in the job. They didn't check to see if these people had the mental makeup for the job. They just ended up in the job. So that was starting to happen at the same time. So we're sort of in a bad way. We're in a good way about that time, but at the same time, we're in a bad way. So the people are landing in these roles. There's more and more positions popping up everywhere. The UX job boom has started. That wheel is starting to turn. It is what it is. It was about that time, around about 2013, is when that dreaded acronym UX/UI started to become common. Part of the reason was because people didn't know. They had all these jobs. They were hiring all these UX people, but a lot of people were not really trying to educate themselves about what UX really was. And they thought that UX was just a visual design entity. They thought that we just made things look pretty. They thought that we were presentation layer people, the thing that everybody sees and interacts with. And no, we're 80% everything else. But people didn't know that. And so that dreaded combo acronym started to be used here and there. And then people started thinking it was okay. I heard it. I had it in my title back around 2013 or so. And I thought nothing of it, and I just kept going. I didn't even see it as a threat. And that's why a lot of people, when they hear me always saying things like, there's no such thing as UX UI, and sometimes they react the same way I did when I first heard or first saw UX UI. It's not a threat. This is not an issue. Who cares? And I just kept on going. But eventually I began to see this is dangerous. And matter of fact, while I still held that title, I was commissioned to teach a class called UX versus UI. What's the difference? And that's when I began to separate the two. And I never held that combo acronym in my job, and I never said it. Matter of fact, I never said it even when it was in my title. I never did actually go around talking like that. I always saw it as something that was really confusing. I knew that slash is out of place because it implies that those two things are interchangeable. UX and UI are not the same thing. They're not interchangeable. One is a subset of the other. And it really tickles me when people say UI/UX, because sometimes they just don't care which one is first. But then to put UI before UX is really bad, because proper execution of UI is dependent upon UX. However, it is possible to do UI work, and we experience it all the time. People have tried to challenge me on this to just let you know that they're not paying attention to anything. We see user interfaces everywhere that you can tell no real UX work was done. So it's possible to do UI, to create an interface without actually engaging with proper UX principles. So at any rate, just a little commercial regarding UX and UI. It's starting to become commonly and erroneously used. Fast forward to 2017. And from 2017 until today, present time, when you see social media posts, blogs, like Medium, whatever, discussions on Reddit or LinkedIn, videos on YouTube, whatever you see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whatever you see when it comes to UX content, Has anybody noticed, and I'm asking because I already delved into this, but I want somebody to think about this. Most of the content that's being published right now, this podcast is an exception. Most of the content that's being published for UX professionals is being directed at new UXers. Did you ever notice that? We're not talking about conferences. We're talking about regularly produced content. And you'll often see things about portfolios. I go to meetups, some ad hoc meetups, some scheduled meetups, and it's amazing the topics that come up at those sessions they're a reflection of what you see in all these other places. And all you see is people asking about portfolios. They want their portfolio reviewed. They want portfolio tips, portfolio. They think that a portfolio has the greatest value when it comes to getting a job. It doesn't. Especially when you consider things like other people have testimonies like me who have had jobs in the past where nobody even asked for a portfolio. It wasn't important. Why? They knew how to hire, and they knew that picking the right person was not dependent on a portfolio. If picking the right candidate is dependent upon a portfolio, something is terribly, terribly wrong with that UX operation. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll address that another time. I talked about it last week. We'll get into it again, I'm sure, time and time again, throughout the years, as we already have. People talk about standing out. People talk about putting yourself out there. People talk about getting jobs and job tips and interviewing tips. People talk about design tips. The whole which design do you like better stuff is starting to surface again, which is absolutely ridiculous and amateurish. But when you have people who don't know any better, that's what they're going to produce because they see it as innocent. They see it as helpful. And they're just putting themselves out there. And a lot of people are putting themselves out there because it's all about them. It's not about the discipline. See, these people, they're not like we were back in 2007, 2008, 2011, where everything was focused on the fundamentals and everything was focused on the discipline. Now it's all about you. It's all about whoever's posting the content. And so with this massive shift, UX has become this thing it's just floating. It's just floating in space. Nobody's driving it. And if you try to drive it, you get labeled as a gatekeeper or some other terrible term. You're mean. They remind me of the little kids in the neighborhood. I'm sure a lot of us experienced that, where the kids are running on the grass and there's some older gentleman or older woman who's upset because the kids are running on the grass, and the kids think that the person who wants them to get off the grass is mean. But the truth be told, the kids don't understand the labor that goes into making the grass what it is. The kids didn't pay for the sod. The kids don't have any concept of anything. And so they see that person as mean because they don't understand things from that other person's perspective. If you take that metaphor and apply it to UX, we have the same thing. People who've been in UX for a while, people who respect the discipline, people who are caretakers of the discipline, people who are invested in the discipline, people who care where the discipline is going. When we see somebody, quote unquote, stepping on the grass, we say something about it. But people who don't have any sensitivity because they're not invested, they don't know, they're just new, they just want to check, they just want the job, they don't care about anything else. They're screaming and calling us, those of us that are doing this, mean. Do you catch the metaphor? So there's this childishness that is, and some people say, oh, Darren, you're being judgy. Well, that's childish too. Because really, you can't say that being judgy is bad and then turn around and claim to give somebody constructive criticism, because it requires that you judge. There's nothing wrong with judgment. You just need to be accurate about it. You just need to be truly concerned about it. You need to actually say things that are going to build somebody instead of just being just generally critical or just throwing some criticism out there. And a lot of people who claim to give constructive criticism are actually giving destructive criticism. And isn't it funny? You never hear anybody talk about destructive criticism. If there's constructive criticism, then there's destructive criticism. And destructive criticism tears down, and constructive criticism builds up again. So now you see what I said earlier about no positive, no negative. So just tapping into that. But back to these topics you hear all the time. Portfolios. People talk about standing out, putting yourself out there, getting jobs, design tips, or maybe some stuff about tools. They want to hear about Figma. This is what you see. This is what you see. This content is directed at newer UXers. So now the discipline has shifted, because when this stuff is happening, and there are too many people who seem to recognize this imbalance. When this stuff is happening, this imbalance has now become the norm. And now people who observe this stuff, who see all of this content flying around and who hear the UX people talking about this stuff, people who don't know, the stakeholders, the client, these people think that's what UX is. So now everything has been redefined. The trajectory, the focal point of the discipline has been repainted. And now it's all about portfolios. Now it's all about standing out. Now it's all about putting yourself out there, yada, yada, yada. And this couldn't be further from the truth. This is not good. It's not good for us. It's not good for the 150 to 500 people that are going to enter UX while you're listening to this podcast. There's still hordes of people coming into UX, and they're coming into UX based on false pretenses. On top of that, which makes it even worse. So you have people who come into UX under false pretenses, hear misinformation, take the misinformation as gospel, and then because they're so buried in anchoring bias, they just gravitate to that. And when they hear something different, they just shoot it down. No critical thinking, no filter. We have problems, folks. We are living in this right now. Right now. And again, not too many people seem to recognize this imbalance that's going on now. Let me tell you something else that explains why this imbalance is so dangerous. It doesn't matter what the discipline is in the world. On average, approximately, entry-level roles in any discipline are not going to make up more than 2.5% of the roles. There are some exceptions, but pretty much there's always going to be a very small percentage. Everything else is for people who are established and growing, and that keeps a discipline healthy. You can't have 20, 25, 30% new people, 40% new people. You can't do that. And there's some people who are recognized as UX leaders that will say, you know what? You need to make sure, just go out and hire all entry-level people. And the only reason they say that is because they're going to make money. When you keep shooting yourself in the foot, they're going to make money. If you were actually gullible enough to fall for that rhetoric, then you're going to go back to them and have them come to save you from the mess that you got yourself into, failing to realize you got yourself into that mess because you listened to their counsel in the first place. So that said, again, approximately, say 2.5, definitely in UX, going to be around 2.5. You want to say in a high point, 5% tops, no more than that. And this doesn't even count the open positions. We're talking about the number of roles in all of UXdom. There's a very, 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 very small percentage of these roles are entry level. So then the open positions, that's going to be small also. Very small. But yet, again, most of the information that's surfacing is directed at whatever the topic is. Most of that information is being directed at new people. Since when does anybody engage in caretaking in any way, form, or fashion, educating, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it? Since when is it all dedicated to or predominantly focused on those people? The ROI of this content that's being shed is little to none in general. But what's going on is they keep hearing that all the time, to the point when they hear something else, they feel like something is wrong. Why aren't we talking about what helps us? And again, it's actually childish. And some people are not going to like the fact I said it. I don't really care. It's childish because it's all about, kids are selfish. Kids are selfish. Babies are selfish. It's all about the baby. The baby is selfish until you drive it out of them by helping them to build some humility as they get older. And so it's all about them. They want you to change their diaper. They want you to feed them. They want you to burp them. They want you to pick them up. It's all about them. The same things are happening. The same things. And I can really feel it. Anyway, somebody's not going to like it but it's the same thing. I'm not going to coddle you. This is what's happening. And if we don't fix it, it's going to get worse. It's already bad. It's going to get worse. So at any rate, let's take that a step further. Another related issue to this involves perceptions of UX seniority. You've got people out there with 1 year of experience now that are getting the senior title. 2 years, seniors. I know situations where people received a bigger title to try to get them to stay with the company. They haven't earned the title. The title is not representative of who they are. Then you have this title that you don't deserve and you're not demonstrating, you're not operating like that. Then you go interact with a stakeholder, God forbid you interact with a leader in the organization and you talk out the side of your neck, as we say, you say something that makes absolutely no sense. And I hear a lot of people, they just talk to be talking. They don't say anything of any value. And these smart leaders who got in their positions because they earned them and they're really smart and they hear you say ridiculous things, they hear somebody say ridiculous things, now they actually turn around their perception, their value perception of UX takes a mega hit. And so now we've got problems. See, that's why you can't just sling titles around. You can't just go around and call somebody something because that's what they want to be called. Let me tell you what the seniority spectrum was, the way that the rankings came about years ago, the way it always was. 0 to 3 years, entry level. 3 to 7 years, mid level. 8 to 10 years, senior. 10 to 15 years, or just say 10 years and above, lead, principal, but the closer you are to 15, you probably be principal as opposed to lead. Now they've thrown another term in there, staff. That's along the same lines as those. I interacted with somebody a week ago and we were talking about this very same thing. And the person got upset because I said, a company said they were looking for a mid-level people with 1 to 5 years experience. I'm going, you can't be mid-level at 1 year. That's not accurate. Why are you blowing smoke at people by misdirecting them like this? And one person said, I don't want to work for a company that's going to keep me from progressing. Yeah, you can reach senior level at a year. It's funny how people who haven't traveled that path think that you can do it. No, you can't. You can't. I had 10 years and still couldn't get the senior title. Sometime back in the past there, I couldn't get it. I had 10 years and they still wouldn't give it to me. It's today, they just give out titles like they're giving out Twinkies or donuts or something. It's creating problems, perception problems, not only for stakeholders and for clients, but for people who are up and coming in the discipline. Because now, on top of the fact that people think that they can achieve something without having done anything, now, when you see a job posting for, say, a senior UX researcher or a senior UX designer, and you look at the job description, look at it, they'll tell you how many years. It lets you know what their perception is of experience in conjunction with that title. And I have very rarely seen, you just, matter of fact, you just don't see it anymore. You don't see where a senior is really a senior. So now when somebody who has 7+ years of experience, many times goes and applies for a job, they're going to actually dismiss that individual because they think that a person with 2 or 3 years is a senior. It's creating so many problems for the discipline at large. It's terrible. We're starting to see entry-level people who are considered to be seasoned. I saw an event. Yeah, come out and hear so-and-so talk to us about UX. This person is a senior UXer and they're going to share their wisdom with us. And I got curious because something, it's like you could smell it. Something was wrong. And I went and I looked up the person's LinkedIn profile. 3 years. 3 years. The person hadn't been doing UX, but that long. And they're going to talk like that. But does the audience know? No. Who's coming to hear a person with 3 years of experience who's being presented as a seasoned UX professional? Is a person with 15, 20 years going to come hear that? No, not likely. A few might be there, but generally speaking, I'm going to hear that person for what? I have other things to do. I'm going to respect my time, and how you spend your time says something about how much you respect yourself, but that's another topic for another time. Really sad. And I brought something up and people were upset about it. And people are always getting upset at me, but shouldn't you look in the mirror and get upset at yourself? It's really interesting how all this stuff works. Here's the craziest part about all of that. They're excited about the 3-year seasoned UX professional, but when they come across people with 10 years, 15 years, and this is happening everywhere, 20 years, 25 years, there's a whole, not everybody. I know there's people who appreciate us. I know that. And I know that, and you know that. But you also need to know that there's people, they want nothing to do with us. And there's these people, they love ignoring. They know you have the experience when you start saying these things, but they really want to displace you. So they sort of pretend like you don't exist. They treat you like you don't exist. So these same people ignore those who truly have experience. You have to be in a state of absolute delusion to think that you're going to achieve a certain level of acumen by ignoring people who went before you. Doesn't make sense. We wouldn't do it when I was coming up in UX. I loved any opportunity to listen to people who had more experience than me, and still do it today. You can't get anywhere by ignoring those who went before you. When instead you can climb on our shoulders. It make no sense, but that's what's happening. I'll get manager and director roles now, 1 to 3 years of experience. That's just insane. That makes no sense. So again, now people, and I sort of have the demarcation at about 7 years. People with about 7 to 8 years of experience are being pushed out. We're being displaced. And because of that, the discipline is being turned on its head, because these people who are occupying this space, they really haven't achieved, and then trying to present themselves as if they're somebody that they're not. The discipline is upside down. The discipline is upside down. We're trying to make it work, but it's difficult to make it work when there's so many people who won't cooperate and really don't honor the ethics associated with the discipline. I had an interesting conversation, a great conversation actually, with somebody that I met at when I spoke at Convey UX recently. And thanks again to the folks, the Seattle folks. Had a great time out there and had a ball talking about the UX maturity out there with them. And we were talking about the different challenges that everybody's facing during this conversation. We're going to actually bring some of those people on here soon. We're going to have some panel discussions and get some other voices for you to hear about on some upcoming episodes. But we're having this conversation, and the person shared with me, and I understood why, and I understand it, and I embrace what the person was saying. But there's something I want to point out. I didn't get to share this when I was talking with the individual. The person had the perception that I was only focusing on well-established UXers, and that I wasn't really concerned with the newer UXers, and the person hasn't known me that long. The people who know me know I'm very concerned about new UXers, but that's not, I don't put that on a pedestal. I'm concerned about everybody, but more importantly, I'm concerned about the discipline. And that's what I want to get at here. So I pay attention to everything. I make it my business to understand everybody's journeys and pain points. I talk to everybody. Oh, by the way, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like what UX people do? So we want to understand everything. It's never going to be about my perception, but my perception is part of what I'm presenting, because, hey, it's my perception. I know it firsthand, but I also know what other people are saying. I know what they see as well. It doesn't have really full value until what I'm saying includes other perspectives. So please know that there are other people who see and know what I'm talking about. It's not just me. So at any rate, I pay attention to everything. I'm making my business to understand everybody's journeys and pain points. But my focus is always on the discipline at large. So when I'm talking, I'm actually talking about the discipline. I'm not talking about new UXers unless I specify new UXers, but I'm actually looking at everything. But here's the catch though. As said earlier, we focused on the discipline as a whole early on. Everybody did. And then things shifted. And then when things shifted and the boot camps came along, they just wanted to make money. They really didn't care what happened they didn't know what was going to happen in 10 years because of how they were doing things. They didn't know what was going to happen because they ignore actually teaching people about information architecture and have the audacity to think that you can really teach people to do UX and just touch on information architecture and ignore it when it was at the core of what we did for years. You can't do that. But the boot camps don't know that, but that's what they do. They barely touch on information architecture, just barely. We have to take care of the discipline. And what the more senior people are doing and where we are is more important. We may not like that. Some people might not like that, but it's true. Because if you let the seniors fall, what do you think's going to happen to the discipline? We're already being displaced. What do you think's going to happen? There's a bunch of us that can't get jobs. I know former directors, former managers, really seasoned, skilled, sharp as a tack, cannot get jobs today while I record this. Cannot get jobs. I know people who are getting management jobs and they're not qualified at all. They don't know. They don't have the discipline. They're coddlers. They have that coward streak. I know some people who spew misinformation. And when you have a leader that's spewing misinformation, that's not good for us. I'm all about your livelihood. Go make your money, but please clean up the poop. It doesn't work to allow these kinds of things to grow and to be cultivated. Fix it. Keep your job, keep your check, more power to you, pay your mortgage. But the more we exalt pure UX, everybody benefits. If the cult of UX continues its rise as it is now, the more we suffer. Does everybody get that? I actually said something to that extent to somebody who was talking about the seniority thing, and he responded with a laugh emoji. I blocked him. I'm done with you. Because if you laughed at somebody speaking wisdom, you're not going anywhere. It goes for everybody under the sound of my voice. Right now, too, you're not going to make progress. This is a discipline that revolves around pragmatism. We revolve around truth. We revolve around facts. If somebody can share truth and facts and you can laugh, make light of it, ignore it, you have just destroyed your own trajectory. Your own upward trajectory is now going downward. And so we have to be better than that. We're not very pragmatic today. Pragmatism is not even popular. And when I did my emotional intelligence masterclass for Interaction Design Foundation, and I really stressed that pragmatism, the lack of pragmatism is an EQ red flag. I actually called out pragmatism as being another EQ trait that you don't hear a lot of the EQ authors and leaders talking about, but you just flip it and you've got a red flag. And so if you are truth averse, fact averse, you're not going anywhere. It's just that simple. It's not going to work. Guess how we build trust with our stakeholders and with our clients? It revolves around pragmatism. The less pragmatic you are. I mean, do you realize if you're not pragmatic, you cannot empathize? You cannot understand things from somebody else's perspective? And when you do, you'll ignore it? So these things are critical to success in UX. But at any rate, back to this conversation. So we have to take care of the discipline at large. What's going on with the people? When I was coming up, it was Jacob Nielsen, it was Don Norman, it was Nathan Shetroff, it was Alan Cooper, it was Susan Weinschenk, it was Kelly Goto, it was Christina Watkins, all these people. These are the people I look to. Everything, they were the most important. Those people were the most important. If all of them stopped writing, Jesse James Garrett and all these other, if they stopped, then we're all in trouble. And now they're just trying to remove the next generation of UX leaders. They're trying to remove all of us. And we'll talk about that to another extent next week, because there's an asterisk there, and I'll talk about the asterisk next week. We need to take care of that. If you take care of the seniors, if you take care of the people who labored, who earned the right to be in the director and the management roles, who should not be sitting at home unemployed, do you realize it will automatically take care of the juniors? Do you realize it will automatically pave the way for the entry-level people? People are shooting themselves in the foot. I talked to somebody who was sharing with me how that the UXers at their job, this is not me, this is someone else. I've seen it. I've experienced it. This person said they're around all of these junior UXers. They go around lying and saying that they're leads. They go around lying because nobody's stopping them. They go around, they lie, and they tell people they're directors when they're not. They tell people that they're seniors. They go around saying any and everything because there's nobody. People assume that they know what they're talking about, so nobody knows that they're just a bunch of grifters. They don't realize that they're charlatans, and people don't. That's the UX person. They're the experts, and they just listen to them, and they just let them go. And it's just the person they want to get out. and I shared before about another situation where a person is working with a bunch of juniors, and instead of riding the coattails of the senior, they're trying to, they actually get together and they plan, they try to connive, they try to scheme to get him fired. That's ridiculous. And I've seen that a bunch of times and heard about that from other people a bunch of times. Who has time to do that kind of stuff? These people, they said, give us a chance, and now you got the chance. What are you doing with it? I know there's people that are doing the right thing. There's just too many of the juniors that are doing exactly what I mentioned today. And they'd rather earn the longevity in their position by getting people fired, by stealing ideas. Yeah, this is happening. Instead of earning it. The entitlement is terrible. That's another issue. That's an EQ red flag. Entitlement. This kind of thing's terrible, folks. It's terrible. And it is happening. So, as a whole, in the history of UX, when UX was healthy, the discipline itself was the major focus of the vast majority of the practitioners. It was not until the last 5 years or so that the focus shifted to the newcomers. I can't tell you how many meetups I go to, and all the conversation, everything's revolving around the newcomers, and you just go from meetup to meetup to meetup to meetup, and the conversations are identical. And so everybody's sitting there. Is this what UX is about? No, it's not. And when we shift, we'll be better off. So I'm bringing it to light. We need to fix it. And then we'll all reap it, and we'll be in good shape. But folks, this is where we've died. This is where we are in trouble, and the ship needs to be righted. We'll be speaking about that more and more over the next few months, actually in total. As we close, every discipline is where it is today because the occupants of each specific discipline properly represent and serve as caretakers of their disciplines. So it's not just UX, it's just we're just new to the party, if you will. But auto mechanics, they are caretakers of their discipline. Medical professionals, no matter what part of the medical world they operate in, they're caretakers. Each one is a caretaker of their discipline. You go into an automobile dealership, the salespeople, caretakers, real estate folks, caretakers, mortgage folks, caretakers, dentists, caretakers, bakers, florists, you name it. Everybody is a caretaker of their discipline. And remember, this discipline is new and we're under siege. So there has to be attention because UX, when it comes to people being caretakers, there's not many caretakers. And the people who do like to function as caretakers, we're being subjected to ridicule quite a bit. And a lot of us who do speak out, we're sacrificing to do these things. We get demonized by people. We get called gatekeepers. We're not gatekeepers, not as they suppose. Are we gatekeepers? Yeah, but not as they suppose. We're gatekeepers in the true sense of the word, not the urban definition that they're using that came out of the gaming world. We're actually gatekeepers in that we're advocating for quality, and that's a good thing because all the disciplines that I'm talking about here now, when you look at the disciplines in the world and the entire professional world, every healthy discipline values gatekeeping. UX is struggling because UX as a whole fights against gatekeeping. So we need to fix this. We are surrounded by people who seek to get ahead at the expense of the discipline. This is not good because this is happening. It's destroying the very fibers of UX as being in the process. It's destroying us at the core. We are imploding as a discipline because things are backwards. And I said this earlier, I say it again. If this continues, we're going to continue on this current slope, this slippery slope that we're on. I see more people seemingly waking up, but it's not enough because the train of misinformation it's faster, it's larger, and it's catching a lot of people. I mean, somebody goes to a presentation and they hear UX UI and 500 people heard it and they assume that it's a good thing and they run off with it. And the one story I told where somebody got up at a UX research event and they said some misinformation. They shared some misinformation, and I had a rapport with the individual. So I talked to them about it, and they made excuses for it, never apologized, and just said, oh, well, moving on. And then came back to me later as if we never had that conversation to ask me to speak at one of their events. And there's no ethics there. There's no integrity. I will not operate in conjunction with a group, saying is now, where there's no integrity. And if there is no integrity in the group that I'm connected to, it's because I haven't seen it yet, but I will find out. And when I do, I pull back. I will not be associated with somebody who's doing harm to the discipline. And I know a lot of entities that are doing harm to the discipline today. So, folks, UX has been redefined. We have to face that. It's a fact. UX has been redefined, and it's not until we begin to take the time and pay the price, really, to represent the discipline properly that we can get ourselves back on solid ground. I'll close here. We were talking about the whole UX UI thing, and somebody I've known for a long time actually said, well, UX UI, yeah, that's not the thing, but that's what most people understand, as if that was an excuse to use that terminology. We cannot allow, I've said this a bunch of times, so this is nothing new, and this is not, I'm not doing any speaking negatively toward that, there's that word again, toward that individual, because I'm just repeating something I've been saying for years, is that you cannot allow people who do not know what the discipline is and people who are not responsible for the well-being of the discipline, never allow them to define anything about the discipline. It is not their responsibility, and they do not have the authority. Don't let them dictate to us what to call ourselves or to define who we are. Do not allow it. And so if we compromise and give in because they keep saying it, then that's that cowardice that I'm talking about. And the person that said, yeah, I took a stand and I got in trouble for taking a stand. Like, who you telling? I've been going through that for years. That's nothing new to me. So and I still am gonna stand up. I've only gotten in trouble once in my career to the nth degree for having done that, but I'm still not going to change. I'm not going to compromise. And I said this before. I refuse to be the prisoner of somebody else's ignorance. So can we take that to the bank today and make sure that we represent the discipline properly, learn how to navigate around people who are intent on believing things that are not true. I'm not telling you to go and get in people's face and be combative. That's not emotionally intelligent. But we still need to know, we still need to cultivate, we still need to educate. So let's remember, we are the caretakers of our discipline. If we don't take care of UX, somebody else will, and we're not going to like the way that plays out. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you again for taking time to listen to the world of UX. Thanks for listening to my rants And we will, if all goes well, we're going to try to get into the end. And the ends are, this last part is going to pack a wallop. It's going to shock some people. I'm going to forewarn you now, but there's some things that need to be said, most notably about that asterisk that I mentioned earlier, because there are some things that are going on that some people are not going to want to hear. But if you don't know it, you'll never be able to overcome it. If you don't know it, you'll never be able to obtain the victory over that thing that we need to face, and we need to face it. And then I know some of the people, if you're listening to this show, it's highly likely you're not one of the cowards that I mentioned. So until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, wishing everyone all the best. And until next week, happy UXing, everybody.
Thanks for joining us for this session of CX of M Radio. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit cxofm.org for more resources.